Pain. I have learned over time that pain has a personality.
It can take over completely, to either paralyze you in defeat, or propel you in strength, to a place where you find purpose.
It could be the pain of a business loss, a relationship gone sour, a failed career,
A failed marriage, or, in my case, a child buried too early.
Whatever your pain is, you can choose how to allow that pain to determine the outcome of your life.
Walk with me through my journey of how I have allowed my pain to grow into a purpose so amazing and glorious. Justin.
Growing Through the Pain of Loss is a real-life account worth reading.
Get your copy from Amazon and other leading online retail bookstores.
Hi, welcome to this evening's broadcast. It's definitely going to be an evening you're going to remember for a long, long time. Again, we want to thank you all. Thank you for all the support we've received, the likes, the comments on social media. We appreciate all of that. This evening, we are doing something slightly different from what we had done before, where we were showcasing our authors. We thought about that this evening, and we thought it would be good to start to step some of you through exactly what we do and what the process is like. So if you have an idea of being an author, or you have that book in you and you're wondering, how do I start the journey? Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to step through that and show you what it entails. Aki, I know you want to add some things to that.
Yeah. So, well, once again, like I can said, a big thank you to everyone, to all our listeners, our followers. We're really grateful, and yeah, like I can said, it's going to be an interesting 2 weeks because we get asked questions about, okay, I'm an author. How do I go about publishing my book? Do I need content to publish a book? Can I just publish a book with an idea? Yeah, so a lot of those questions, we're going to try and answer those questions over the next 2 weeks, and hopefully encourage you to take that next step.
Yes, and of course, you can send in comments on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, and on Twitter. I think Twitter is live this evening. And there are a few more channels that will just continue to build these things out so we can reach you where you are. All right. Let us start with content. Akin,
Yeah.
what is your take on content when people say they want to write? Where does that start from?
Okay. I guess. Sorry. Excuse me. I guess the first question when someone comes and says they want to write is, why do you want to do it? Why do you want to publish a book? Because there needs to be a why before there's a doing. Now, people have different reasons for wanting to publish a book. Maybe you're a freelancer with a new business. You're someone who's got a skill set that you want people to know about. You know, maybe you're a well-established business and you want people to write a book. You know, want to write a book to just showcase yourself and all that. But basically, I'd say that most of the time when you want to publish a book or when you want to, you know, become an author, it's because you've got a story you want to tell. So no matter what, no matter what the main thing initially is that the reason why you want to publish your book is because you've got a story to tell the world, and you've got something that you believe that people can benefit from. So hence, you want to publish a book. The second question is like, okay, I've got the content. So how do I actually do it? What route do I take? When it comes to this, you've got various routes. Now, back in the day, there was only one route, and that route was like the famous, traditional publishing route, where you'd go out there, you'd try and get an agent. That agent will take your manuscript and start knocking on the doors of various publishing houses. They look at your script and it's like, oh, check out the first 2 pages. It doesn't even, it's not for us. In fact, you're even lucky if they get to check the first 2 pages, because someone will just see the title and just throw it out and all that. So that was then. But now, we've suddenly hit this place where you can actually self-publish. So the question is, traditional or self? What
Before
route
we
should I
get
take?
into
Okay,
traditional
what do
or
you think about
self,
that?
Aki, on that content point,
Okay.
we've seen
Okay.
a variety of backgrounds that people come with. So, for example, we've seen people who maybe run weekly programs and have then decided, you know what, I want to take my notes and I want to convert that into a book. And we've also seen people
Mm-hmm.
who don't have programs like that, but who had an idea, like you talked about, who felt this is a topic I feel passionate about and I want to write something about. And those type of people also come up, they put their manuscripts together and they bring that and they say, hey, this is the work. But I want to ask a question there, because for a lot of the some for some, not a lot, some of the authors we deal with, they say things like, I've finished the work, and then they submit the manuscript. And what have you seen in assessing those manuscripts?
Most of the time, what you see is that the finished work is not finished.
Hmm.
Because what you tend to realize is that we've had cases where someone said, "Well, I finished the work," and they came with 10 pages, and you're like, oh, "Okay, what's the story here?" You know, and all that, and it's, "Oh yeah, can't you see it? You know, chapter one is that page," and I'm like, "Nah, this isn't a book. This is just like you want." So what tends to happen is that you sit down with the person and you actually build up. You kind of try and understand what the person's trying to build, and in some cases almost write that book together. Do you understand? So that it's almost like, okay, this is what you're trying to say here, this is what you need here, these are the kind of things. So it's almost like at times when people come, when budding authors come, they want to write something. It's more like they've got steps, but those steps are not the content. It's when you sit down and we discuss a little, and at times even give assignments where, okay, we've discussed this, go and work on chapter one. Yeah, you want to
But
say
what
something?
is also interesting there, which I think that a lot of people can learn, given the focus of the next 2 weeks, which is really what you need to know to publish your book, is that you don't really need to wait for the work to be complete before you engage with some professional advice. Of course, you need to be formed in terms of your thoughts, but you don't need to wait to complete everything because more often than not, the publisher you engage with will walk through the manuscript with you and will have suggestions. And the earlier you engage with them, the better it is overall. So you can get to the outcomes you want quicker.
Yeah, yeah. So what you'd say is really is that you need to have a vision for the book.
Yes.
You need to know what you want to accomplish with the book. So as long as you got a picture, you know, when you bring that manuscript or when you bring those pages, because like I said, it might not be a manuscript. When you bring those pages, that pages which contain the idea, which contain the picture, which you share with the publisher, together you can build that into a bestseller.
Yeah. And for the people who have weekly programs or weekly sessions where maybe they speak regularly or maybe they have small groups where they meet together and you have someone who is building the notes and sharing with people. We've got something for you that we will deal with next week, and that's a slightly different way because for such people, you may already have the content you need to move on to that next stage of being able to publish a book that you have. Um,
Yeah, that's right.
so, in terms of content, moving on from content and now looking at the self publishing and the traditional publishing models, why would someone choose one over the other?
Well, most of the time, I'd say um, the traditional route, like I was explaining initially, with the traditional route, what would happen is that most of the time you'd go out there, you'd try and find yourself an agent. Now the agent takes that manuscript and goes knocking on the doors of all these publishing houses that, oh look, I've got this book, it's the best book in the world. Take it, just read the pages if you can and all that. And then so many times what tends to happen is that it's either it doesn't even get read before it's rejected, or someone takes a look at the title and it's like, oh well, no, I don't even know who this person is. And so many times you can't even get your foot in the door to even begin to start before you can to even start that process in the first place and all that. But then the good thing with the self-publishing side of things is like it's simply what it is.
Yeah.
You do it yourself, in quotes.
I think it was that
And with that,
challenge of traditional publishers that led people to start to, that actually birthed the self publishing industry. Because a lot of people had good content, that someone maybe misjudged, and because they misjudged it, they
Yep.
rejected it. And it's important that going down the self-publishing route is not necessarily an indication of substandard content. It just
Oh,
means
no, not at
that
all.
maybe
Not at all.
you met the agent on a bad day and the agent decided to reject the book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I mean, you've got lots of self-published books that are bestsellers today.
Absolutely.
You know, and you've got all these traditional houses looking at it. That, oh, guess what? That book actually landed on my table and I didn't read it. If only I had read it. Do you
Yeah.
understand? So it's got nothing to do with the quality of the quality of the contents. It's just like you said, you might just have hit the publisher on a bad day, or he's just simply not interested. Or it could simply be that, well, we've got the books, we've got our quota for the next 1 year, so we're not taking anything on else. We're not taking anything else on for the next 1 year. So that's it. You know, it could be any reason. You understand? But it doesn't. It's got nothing. Most of the time, it's got nothing to do with the content of the book.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that we would really advise people, that if you try the traditional route and it works for you, fantastic. If it doesn't work for you, there's still the self-publishing route. And to be honest, if you get a good a self-publishing company to work with you, once the two books are out, you won't really know the difference between the one that came through the
Yeah.
self-published route or the one that came through traditional publishing houses. So it's important when
Yeah.
that decision is being made, for the author to choose the model they feel comfortable with. Because sometimes you go the traditional publishing route and the whole idea changes completely. And by the time you finish the book, it's no longer looking like yours. You feel like you've lost control, which were some of the things that drove
Yeah.
people to that self-publishing side of things. But there's
Yeah.
another
And
myth.
then also just a little bit word of encouragement. Okay.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
No, you go. You go.
So what I was going to say is that
No, I
there's
just wanted to
another
pop in
myth
a word of
here.
encouragement.
Yeah, there's another myth
Okay.
that if you go down the self-publishing route, the quality is always going to be bad. You're always going to find errors in the book, loads of errors in the books. You're going to find substandard work, in effect. And what we usually say to that is that self-publishing is kind of broken down into a number of areas, the way we look at it. So you've got the likes of Lulu and some of these other platforms where an author can just finish their work internally, take the work, and just push it out without really getting any sense of advice from professionals on it. And that would work. And even that channel doesn't mean that the quality would be bad. It just means that you haven't had the right sort of, you may not have had the right sort of vetting on the work. And then you have the people who would come to companies like ours and say to us, I've got this work, I want to publish it, I need some help. And we provide the help, which again should help to increase the quality.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you hit something. I mean, what happened initially when self-publishing actually kicked off was that, it was just what it was just what the name says. It was self-publishing. So you'd write a story, you'd get some content together, you'd read through it yourself, maybe give it to a friend to read, and then you'd publish it. So initially, yes, there was that issue of it wasn't up to the right standard, editing wise, cover design wise, blurb wise, it just wasn't put together properly.
Yeah.
But over the years, like self-publishing companies have improved. Things have stepped up big time. Where it's what you're getting in a lot of the traditional houses, where you've got editors, you've got graphic designers, you've got all this coming together to work on your book. So like Akin said, you won't know the difference. You won't know the difference. Even now, you've got a lot of these self-publishing companies with marketing strategies for you.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things are all in place, which so when you publish your book, it almost like puts everything in autopilot for you and all
Yeah.
that. So it's not don't think that if you're self-publishing, you're stepping down, you're on the bottom of the ladder. That's not what it is. It's just a different avenue to get your book out there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So feel free choose what's important, what works for you. Obviously, building the relationship is important. You need to have a good relationship with your whoever your contact is in the company. One of the things we do at Interface Media is we say that anytime you engage with us, you are dealing with someone who has already written a book. So they understand the process, they
Yeah,
understand what they've gone through, and they can help you. And that's a little bit of the value that we add to the process, just to make it a lot easier and better for people who want to
yeah,
write.
yeah.
Then moving on from the self-publishing and the traditional publishing ones, we've got the issue of book sizes. People always come to us and they say, "Hey, what's the size of the book?" And what would you say the guidelines would be on that?
Uh, is there any limit on what the size of the book could be? I would say no. It all depends on the reader. You understand? So who is the audience you're trying to reach out to? You understand? Who do you want to read your book? I mean, if you look at it, if I was writing a book for children, I don't think I'd write a 150 page book,
Yeah,
because so many times once it goes past 30 pages and there are no pictures, your daughter's gonna go, your son's gonna go, Dad, next. Do you
yeah,
understand? So I think the size of the book would so many times depend on the audience. Who are you writing that book for? You understand?
yeah. And what's also interesting about the size thing is that in this day and age of instant instant results, people just want to get that result out there. The bigger books would really be you making a statement saying that I am targeting the more mature readers, because a lot of readers are not matured readers. A lot of readers would read a book of 50 pages, 60 pages, and that's it, they've had enough. So if you've got a book that's a maybe 200-page book or more, usually you may want to consider breaking things down into volumes so that people can maybe read a volume one or a part one of the book, and then there's a part two that talks about the story. Because even as a writer, you need to be a matured writer to keep someone engaged for 300 pages and get people trying to go through that. I think we've got an author where we had to break the book into multiple volumes, and I'm sure we're going to be hearing
Yeah,
from that at some point in the near future, as we bring her to the program to talk about her book. So it's important to have at the back of your mind the reader. All right. A lot of times people say, "Well, this is me. This is what I want to write." But it's when you're writing, it's really not about you. It's your thoughts. It's your vision, as has been said. But more importantly, it's the people who are going to be reading the book that you need to have at the back of your mind when you're writing that book. But is there a
yeah,
trend,
yeah.
Akin, that we
And
see
okay.
in terms of book sizes? Is there a
Uh,
trend?
well, the trend nowadays, like you said, most of the time, because I think it's also because of the generation we're in, the instant generation, where it's almost like if I can't finish this book in a day, I can't. I mean, it's if it doesn't, then I don't want to read it. If I can't finish this book in a week, it's too big, and all that. But then, what I would say is that, like you said, it's your audience. I mean, if I pick up a novel, and that novel is 100 pages, I personally don't think it's worth me reading it.
Why do you say that?
Because I'm used to reading novels. No, because I'm used to novels that it takes me. There's got to be the storyline is building and building and building. So I'm looking at 150, 100, 200, but that's me. Do you understand? So many times what you. But then if it's now look at go back. Let's look at the textbooks we used to read. You understand? Even when it was broken down into volumes, the volumes were still like 300 300 pages and all that. So at times it's also to do with the content. What is the content of the book? You understand? There's some books like, okay, you could say like a daily devotion.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's coming in. It's like, oh, I'm coming in for a word for the day. Do you understand? It could be, so it's almost like a quick get in there and come out. You understand? So I think you've got books for different purposes, and I think depending on the purpose of the book, it also reconditions the mind of the reader. So if I pick up a devotion, I'm thinking, oh, this is a short thing. It can't be big. So if I say a devotion and it's 500 pages big, I'm like, okay.
How exactly am I going to go through this devotion?
You understand? So that's what I'm trying to say when I say that there's no limit in that sense, but it depends on the audience and what you want what's the content of the book, and how soon you want your audience to get that content. You understand?
Yeah.
So that's my little take on that, really. Yeah.
But there's something else around the book size that I think is important for us to call out, because we've seen cases in the past where people felt that the smaller the book is, the less important the things that are in the book, because there's this notion that if you're going to write a book, make sure you write a decent book. You hold it, it feels like a book. And if you write a book that's got, say, maybe 20 pages, 30 pages, or 40 pages, something like that. But that's not a book, if you're going to write a book. And again, going to what you've already said, it depends on your audience. You just need to be focused on what you want to do, focus on your audience, and focus on your message. Because some people, in a bid to make the book much bigger, then they start to just write all sorts of things, and then all sorts of gimmicks in terms of make it 1.5 line spacing, make it 2 double line spacing, just so you can have a big book.
So you can criticize. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I remember those gimmicks. I remember those gimmicks.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember those and all that. But yes, so yeah.
So some manuscripts would land in the early days, I think, and the person feels I've written a lot, and by the time you adjust the book to the preliminary, okay, what book size are we thinking? Remove all the double line spacing. I remember on one particular occasion, the person was like, "What? The book has shrunk." It was like, well, the message hasn't.
Exactly. But what you're talking about here, this is what brought it, but this is kind of what's triggered in or brought in the issue of ebooks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Where there's you had people that were carrying all these big books around. They loved the content, but it was becoming, how am I going to be carrying that big book around? So suddenly you can shrink that. There was a shrinking into an ebook, and suddenly you can carry that same content around in a little file.
Yeah.
You understand? So that was part of what triggered in. That's kind of what brought in the ebook movement initially, wasn't it?
Yes, that was a contributing factor. But I also think that at the time, you also had issues about environmental issues. People who felt that we were taking down too many trees and using this for printing. And on the basis of that, it was also a bit of a push towards how can you do this thing electronically. And I think that also along those lines, there was also that desire to preserve books a bit more. That if they were in electronic format, then you could reproduce it quicker and a lot of all those things. But what I would say to that point, though, now that you bring it up there, is I think technology has moved on since then. And we also had this issue of the type of paper where people felt that there was too much chemical involved in bleaching the paper
Yeah.
to get the wood to be white and all of that. So there was a lot of not just environmental issues, health issues, the size of the books, and people just wanted to make sure they had something they could take along and read. And that also drove, if I remember correctly here, that drove the adoption of things like all these Kindle devices that were specifically focused on books, and all you could do on
Yep.
them was books. But then, phones coming in, the size of phones getting slightly bigger, suddenly started to kill
Yeah.
some of that market.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so quite an interesting trend industry-wise in terms of the switch from paperback to ebooks. And I saw a research result recently that suggested that women are more likely to buy ebooks than men, which is
Ooh.
a bit of an interesting one on some of the research out there.
Yeah. At times you wonder how how this research is done sometimes, isn't it? Because that's an
Yes, I
interesting one,
guess
isn't it?
maybe people buying books and you have to specify gender uh, at the time you're buying, or someone is able to pick up the details from there. Who knows? But I think that yes, we do have some of this credible information out there in terms of that split. But before we move away from this, Aki, there's another question that maybe you kick this off for us. And this is this point around the fact that ebooks was going to kill the print market. Did that materialize?
Yeah. Well, as you can see, it hasn't. Like what you said, you were talking about the reason, one of the reasons why ebooks are coming in, to be in because of the environment, the chemicals, our trees, to preserve our trees and all that. And then, to be fair, when you're looking at maybe around that 2014 to 16, there was this issue of like, wow, this is the end of the paperback, the death of the hardback. We're now in the ebook era and all
Yes.
that. But going by reports that we've seen lately, it's not like that. It
Yeah.
still turns out that close to 70, I think like 76% of books are still in a paperback or hardback format, and only like 24% are ebooks. So, what do you want to say about that?
Yeah, and what we also see is that we've seen cases, and I think there's some research on this, that people actually buy both. So some people prefer
True.
the paperback, but then they want to get on the train and they want to read on the train. And what they will do is that they buy the ebook to read while in transit. And when they get back home, they continue reading the paperback version. So it's a bit of a mix in terms of ebooks, paperback. Again, it's an individual choice. If you like the paperback,
But
go for it. If you like ebook, go for the ebook. And it also doesn't matter in the order in which they're released. Some people prefer release the ebook first and then release the paperback. And for some people, it's release the paperback, then release the ebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And at least one
yeah,
thing we can conclude, one thing we can conclude is that the paperback and the hardback is not going anywhere anytime soon.
no, absolutely not.
You know,
Absolutely not.
you know,
Absolutely
it's
not.
they're going to be around. But like what Akin is saying, I mean, it's simple. I mean, let's look at it. We've got ebooks and paperbacks of the same book anyway. That's
Yeah.
that. So that's why whenever we publish our books, what we try and do now is that we publish your paperbacks, and by default we pop out a Kindle version, an iBook version out there, so that it doesn't really matter whatever format anyone wants to read, it's always available in the market.
Yeah, that's a very important point, Aki. The fact that when you're publishing, look out for a publishing company that can help you across both areas. And there's some simple things, for example, where you go to websites like Amazon, and what you expect to see is that you select the title and you've got the options on the formats, not that you're seeing these things all over the place in different places. It's always important to try to create that centralized option for users. Go to one point, they can see the book, buy the different formats they want. But even if that's not the case, it's also good to make sure that you have all the different formats available. Because remember what we said
Available.
earlier on at the start of this, as an author, you are all about content, but always think about the person going to read your book. How are they going to get it? Where
Yeah.
are they going to get it from? And maybe, Akin, this is a good point for us to segue into the conversation around distribution. Availability. Where do people go to get your book? Because we've seen this thing over the last 2, 3 years, where for one reason or another, Manaki, I would want you to speak to this because you have dealt with a lot more on this side of things, where people have published their book as a standalone book and then come out and said, hey, how do I get this thing on Amazon? How do I get it on all these other retail websites? And it was like, oh, okay, didn't your publisher help you with that? What are you seeing in that area?
Yeah. So once again, I mean, it's almost going back to the trend back in the day where what a lot of people would do if you were self-publishing is that what you'd do is that you'd have your content and you take it to a printer, and what the printer would do is actually print out a number of copies of that book. And then what you would do is that you would go around in different ways to different events, trying to sell your book. So you've got like 1,000 copies in the boot of your car, weighing your boot down, and you're driving, and so anywhere you go, oh hey, do you want my book? It's inside my boot. And in the back of your boot, you had like 1,000 copies and all that. But over time, what you realize is that number one, that puts a limit on where your book will be available. Your book will always be available in your boot. But if your book is only available in your boot, it limits how far, it limits, first of all, it limits the number of people that will see your book, and hence the number of people that will buy your book. So that's where we step into the pod system, which is like a print on demand.
Yeah.
And in this case, what this does for you is, rather than you carrying 1,000 books in your boots, or 100 or 500 books in your boots, you can have your book showing up on over 40,000 online channels around the world. So anyone can pop up in Australia, in China. Oh, that's a dangerous topic nowadays, isn't it? In the States, anywhere, and they can buy your book. Do you understand? Simply because it's all stored in the centralized system, which once that person buys your book, it is printed out to the various country you want it to go to, or that person is based in. You understand? So suddenly what you realize is that rather than you having to carry your books around, all you have to do is set it up on this system, whether it's like set it up on this print on demand system. And then once that book is bought, wherever that person is in the world, the book is delivered there without you even lifting a finger.
Yeah,
Now,
so we
who
would
wouldn't want to do
generally
that?
recommend that anybody that's publishing a book today, obviously there are separate conditions, and we'll speak to that in a minute. But if you are publishing a book today, it's just the standard. It should be the standard that print on demand
Yeah.
is a component of what you're doing. Okay, so it doesn't mean it's the only thing. You may still have to print loads and loads of copies. Say maybe you are going for an event and you are going for a launch event of your book. You may want to order copies and align that to the number of people you're going to see at that launch event. For that reason, you may want to have some copies. But at the same time, you've got to think about, what if you run out of copies at that event? How will people buy more copies? And the other big advantage on on demand that we see is just the logistical challenge, right? Imagine you have the books
Yeah.
in your boot, or you have the books in your library, or you have the books in your garage, for example. You've ordered 1,000 copies, and they're in your garage, and somebody calls you and says, "Oh, I need a copy of your book. Do you have a copy?" Well, you've got that logistical challenge now,
Yeah.
of you've got to figure out how to post it. You've got to figure out how to post it. You've got to figure
Oh,
out, okay, I'm going to go to the post office now. I'm only going to send you copies maybe one day a week. So I'm not going to the post office every day to mail this book. For that reason,
that's
we do
it.
recommend, make sure that print on demand is a component of whatever you're doing, whoever you're speaking to. That should be a component of it. One other thing you touched on, Akin.
I mean, okay. All right. Yeah, you
Sorry,
go. You
one
go.
thing you touched on is the fact that availability is a key thing, right? And one of the reasons it's key is this. Take Amazon, for example. Some people may have Amazon Prime account, for example, which means that delivery may be free. Other people may have other accounts with their retailer of choice. So again, as the reader, you don't want to force, as the writer or the author, you don't want to force your readers into the mold of what you like. You might like Amazon,
Yeah.
but that person might have an account with Book Depository or one of these other sites out there, and that's what they want to use. So it's important to make sure that, ask your publisher, if I come to you, where will my book be available? What will happen if somebody
Yeah.
walks into a bookstore, like you say, in Brazil, and they want my book? Will they be able to get it? I think, Akin, over to you. You were going to say something there before I touch you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you were giving that example, and something just flashed through my head, which was very funny. And it was like, just imagine someone's called you up and said, "Oh, can I get a copy of your book?"
Yeah.
And you're actually on a flight to another country, and you're saying, "Oh, I'm actually out of the country at the moment, but when I get back, I'll post it because it's in my garage."
Oh dear. Oh
so,
yeah, you
so,
just lost the sale
so,
there.
so, so you just lost the sale. You understand? And it's interesting because even when you buy copy, maybe you've got an event and you buy copies. What you
Yeah,
tend to realize is that the author tends to order only a few copies because
yeah.
for so many times they're trying to divert people online to get their books because they're trying to also create an online presence,
Mm-hmm.
which is also pretty important for the for the authors. So they come to an event and you just hear things like, "Oh, I've got 50 copies out there," and then 50 people rush to the table to buy the copies, and then the 51st person gets in and it's like, "Oh, well, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on," you understand? So it's also in a funny way, it's also a sales technique and a
Yeah.
way of pushing people online, so they can create that online presence, which is very important nowadays.
Absolutely, because how do you
Yeah,
get reviews if you're not online? How do you get
yeah,
people to talk about your book and just talk about how the book has been a blessing to them, how they've learned whatever type of book it is, of course, but how the book has impacted them. You want them to put those kind of things online so other people can see that,
yeah,
because ultimately, you want to make money for your effort. And if you don't put it in the places where people can see the book, then you've got a bit of a challenge there that you're going to have to address anyway.
yeah, yeah, yeah. True. So I agree with that.
Yeah, good stuff. And also, I think you've also touched on something which is this thing around events, where people have events and they say, what is the best thing for me? Should I have a website for my book where I brand that website and all I'm dealing with on the website is the book? Or should I just put it as part of something else that I'm doing? And our response to that is obviously varied. Take advantage of whatever platforms you have, because those platforms will definitely help you. And anything that helps you to put the book in front of people is always a good thing. It's always a good
Yeah,
thing. So if you are going for an event, prepare that some people are going to buy your book, but some people you may want to direct online for additional information. I remember we were at the launching of a book for one of our authors, and people were like, "Oh, how can we get more copies?" Yeah, just go on Amazon or the book. No. And they went on their phone. Oh, it's on Amazon. Yeah, 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 sure. Just order it. It's going to get delivered to you.
oh
And
yeah,
and that was
yeah,
great because already
yeah,
you've created a window for people to pick your book, and that is super super important, for people to pick that.
yeah, yeah. In fact, another example there was where I think a group of people wanted to buy a book,
Yeah,
and she specifically said that she normally buys her book. She was in the States, and she said she normally buys her books from Barnes and Noble. That can
yeah,
she walk into Barnes and Noble and pick up some copies of this book? And I said, yeah, well, you go in, you know what the ISBN number is, you tell them, pick it up, and the book gets delivered to Barnes and Noble, and you pick it up from there. And she was like, "Is that what's going to happen?" I said, "Yeah, that's what's going to happen." And then she goes in, she orders the book, and I think it was like maybe like 7 days or 6 days later, she gets a call. She goes in, picks up 20 copies of the book. So it what it does, that there are just no limitations, that that the boundaries are broken.
yeah.
Suddenly there's no limitation to the sale of your book. Anyone anywhere can get it. And that's
Absolutely.
really, I mean, that's what you need to that's where you need to be nowadays. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that there was someone who was in. So we have authors in Kenya, in Nigeria, in South Africa, in the United States, multiple authors in the United States, and just being able to deliver that kind of service, it's important. And one other area in terms of availability is also this issue of where the book gets printed. Right? Again, remember this, the fundamental point is not just about you, it's also about the people who are going to buy your book. And what you don't want is for the cost of printing and the cost of delivery to push people away. So, one of the things we have as part of our supply chain is that depending on where the book is ordered, the book could get printed the book usually will get printed in the nearest printing center to where the book was ordered. And there are multiple printing centers in the US, in the UK, in Australia, just to make sure that the global footprint there is covered. So we encourage people, let that be an important factor. And for us as a publishing company, it's one of the things we looked at. How do we help our authors reduce their cost or maximize their profit by making sure that books get printed locally to their readers? And it's worked a treat over the years. So look out for that area as well. It's a very important area
Yeah.
to look into.
Yeah. So that's one little question that's popping up. Yeah. And someone may be asking, isn't it cheaper to print your books than to use this print on demand system? The answer is yes. Money wise, it is cheaper to print your books with a printer and carry them around or store them in your house. But ultimately, it is cheaper to use the print on demand route based on when you look at how the far reach of your book. You understand? Because what happens is that okay, let's look at it. I print my book £3 for each copy, and I can sell them each for £10. But hey, I've got 1,000 copies sitting in my what's it called, in my garage.
Yeah.
You've got a limitation there where you're only going to get any gains on that book if you sell them, right?
Yeah.
And they're only going to buy them if they buy them from you. So you're that sole outlet for the books that you've printed physically.
Yeah.
But if you use the pod system, first and foremost, even the price, even if it's going to cost you an extra £2 or so on each book, that £2 is already taking care of the stress of you getting your book, wrapping it, throwing it in the post each time, and it cuts out all limitations. So ultimately, when you look at the costs, it is more cost effective to use the pod system than to print
Absolutely.
physically.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of risk involved because, imagine this, you've just printed, 500 copies of your book, and you now notice some very significant errors. And you're thinking, oh dear, how do we correct this? What do we do? You've got 500 copies there that are now, if you want to be really professional, you need to not sell them because you've noticed the errors in there.
That's right.
So it's on so many fronts. The print on demand thing works because if you spot an error post printing or post publishing, you can easily update it, send it back out there, and the next time a new order is placed, they would be buying the book with the corrections that have already been made. Obviously, we do something as part of our process, and that is the fact that we would do what we call a proof copy. Right? We get a proof copy, we send the proof copy out, and there's that feeling of holding one copy of your book and being able to flip the pages of the book, look at the feel, and wow, I remember the feeling when I got my very first book and I turned it around, and it was fantastic. The feel was really fantastic, which is another thing you don't get with the ebook side of things, of course. But with the paperback, just holding that thing in your hand goes a long way to give you that feeling of, yes, I'm really an author in this area. So I think it's an important point for people to remember as well. Think about mistakes. How do you handle mistakes you find in the script afterwards? Yeah, yeah.
True.
We've got about 5 minutes
Well,
left here today. Before we leave this particular topic, since again we're talking about errors, I think it's important to highlight one key point here. One of the things we do as part of our process, and I think maybe next week we'll get into this in a little bit more detail. And this is where we start to look at what we do to reduce the number of errors you have in the first place anyway. And Aki, do you think any book can be 100% error free?
uh, yes, I do.
Absolutely.
Now the interesting thing here, though, is that when it can be, if the right work is put into it, if it's given to the right people, yes, it can be, and all that. It can also be a very expensive process.
Yeah.
You understand? Because I remember reading somewhere where a chap said that he just finished self-publishing his book, and to get that book out had cost him $4,000.
Ooh.
And that was because he had sent it to editors and all that. And the funny thing was that when he got it back, there was one mistake in the book. Now, it was only one mistake, right? But if you spend $4,000,
You don't want one
I don't want to see
mistake.
any mistakes in that book.
You don't want
So
any
he
mistakes.
was livid. That what, after $4,000 and I still see a mistake. Nah, so yeah, I think it's very possible and all that, but it's just that thing of like needing to take the right time, letting the right people look at it,
Yeah.
and
And
yeah.
take
So
advantage
it
of
is
tools.
possible. It might not happen all the time, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Take
and tools,
advantage
yeah,
of
yeah,
tools.
tools,
There are tools out there that
yeah,
help the process. There are tools out there that speed up the process as well. That mean that
yeah,
people who are, your editors, your proofreaders, don't have to 100% rely on manual proofreading. Tools can help you along the way.
yep, yep,
Obviously, there is a balance to that because
yeah,
it's not all tools that that would help in the context of what you want to do. There are a lot of artificial intelligence based tools as well that are now starting to predict
hmm,
the mood of what you've written. But more importantly,
true,
I think that there's nothing as painful as reading a book and you seeing all sorts of grammatical errors, all sorts of, just some of the basic errors just all over the
yeah,
place, or where you see the layout is not right. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing. Also, the layout of the book. I mean, for
mm,
someone like me, I mean, things like that attract me to the book. So
absolutely.
if I okay, I look at the cover and then I open it and it just doesn't, if it doesn't jump out, I'm like, oh, I don't like the way, because the way the book's laid out also affects the way you read it. It
Hmm.
affects how you can read it, how easy it is for you to read. So the second you look at a book, and for some of us that are pretty sensitive on that level, if I look at a book and it's because of the layout, I can't. It's hard for me to read. I just drop it.
Yeah.
So the layout also has to be attractive
Yeah, and I
in that
think
sense.
that's very, very important because professionalism is something that we really push here. But given the time, I think next week we'll start with the production process. We start to look at the impact of the
Yeah,
cover. We move into that actual production process, the proofreading, the editing, how you break the book down into chapters, and some of the things we do in that area, just to make sure that you have these things at the back of your mind when you're going through your own process of what you want. There's no reason for your book not to be as professionally laid out as any other book you see out there. There's so many tools available now. You've got more professional outfits out there that can help us. Any last points, Akin, before we go?
You see, if we start at any points now, we're going to run over.
We're going to
So like Akin said, next week we'll go into the.
All right.
Yeah. So next week what we'll do, we'll go into the production process next week, and
Yes. And if you have
We'll take
any
it from there.
questions, you put those questions online. We'll get back to them. We'll address these questions as we go along. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we will be back next week as we deal with this issue of what you need to know to publish your book. See you next time. Bye.
Do you have dreams that you would love to see fulfilled? Then, Desire to Destiny is for you. Hopes are dashed, and people are left frustrated and disappointed because they rely solely on willpower and hard work to get them to their desired destinations. Desire to Destiny is a practical 30-day guide that teaches key success strategies from God's Word that, if applied, will take you from the first step of identifying the true desires of your heart through to experiencing the full manifestation. From the pages of this book, you will learn about topics like the art of meditation, learning to unlearn, the true cost of offense, the strength to walk away, and much more. Get started on this exciting devotional journey and watch great things happen in your life. Get your copy today. Don't miss the opportunity.